put a lien on my neighbors for not being able to pay an illegal special assessment, I'll put a lien on your $20 million mansion. Posted by MKAir01. This may be the most petty thing I have ever done in my life. I'm a pretty petty person, and I also believe in malicious compliance, but this takes the cake. So I bought a condo in a building in a large city in the US about 2.5 years ago. The building has an HOA that we all pay into monthly. Since I've lived here, the building has rapidly deteriorated, and we have all hired an attorney for a class action style lawsuit. I'm talking broken elevators, broken rooftop AC units, the pool was empty for 4 months during the summer, and so on. The people in the building are great though, and we are a friendly bunch. Last year, I took the HOA to small claims court because they failed to provide financial documents that show us how our fees are being spent. As this is a legal requirement for all HOAs in my state, I won the case and was awarded the $30 filing fee plus $1. Symbolic, I sued for documents and not money. The fact that they can't provide the docs as they are legally required to do is a separate issue, among others, including possible criming that we've hired the attorneys for. I have asked the HOA to pay the $31 to me, and the president of the HOA wants to either meet me somewhere private to give it to me, or he wants to mail me a satisfaction of judgment form, have me sign it and mail it back to him, and then he will mail me a check. No to both. 3 days after I won the case, the HOA announced that they were going to charge us all a special assessment of about $1,000 each and an increase in our monthly dues of 10%. In my state, a membership vote gets triggered if you charge a special assessment that brings the building more than 5% its yearly income, which means 51% of the owners must approve of the assessment for it to take effect. As this money is about 20% of our yearly income, a vote should have taken place. When we asked about this vote, the HOA said that it was being made under an emergency clause, which means that the membership vote doesn't have to take place. The emergency? Fixing the elevator that broke on December 24, 2021. The spirit of the emergency clause is for things like fire and earthquake, flood, and so on, not a broken elevator that's been broken for a year already. When there was understandable pushback, the HOA sent out a little email stating that anyone who didn't pay the assessment would have a lien put on their unit. The liens came down yesterday to those that couldn't pay $1,000 on short notice. Our attorneys told us that even though the money is still in dispute, we still have to pay it, and I did pay mine, but we also have a lot of retirees and lower income people in the building. The HOA president's house is currently on the market for $20 million. I just got back from the courthouse where I filed a $31 lien against it for $140, clouding its title. It's a matter of principle, not money. Now, the title can't change hands until he pays me my $31, and I am perfectly within my rights to collect on a judgment owed. I will for sure keep you guys updated after the attorneys do their thing. That might be a story for Pro Revenge though. And some confusion here. I initially filed the small claim with the HOA as defendant. The small claim judge determined that was incorrect and said I should sue the individual as the president of the HOA and made me amend the case. Therefore, the defendant in this whole case was the one individual person, and therefore, he is responsible for the $31, and I can exercise my right to put a lien on his home in my effort to collect. I can only put a lien against the defendant, and the defendant is a person. I can't put a lien against the HOA because they were not the defendant in the case. The courts had already determined that the person owes me money. I don't need to continue to argue a case that I've already won. People are accusing me of lying because they don't understand the legal system. Thank you to all those that are supporting my efforts. We hope to have the people overthrown and in prison by the end of the year. We've turned over all that we have to our attorneys, who are the best HOA attorneys in LA. We will get these people. The update. So a couple of weeks ago, we were all informed that there's going to be a second special assessment this year. Our last one was about $1 per square foot, and this one is $1.25 per square foot. I'm getting a rhinoplasty next month and just can't afford to plop another $1,250 to these people, and therefore, I'm not paying. This, combined with the SA from a few months ago, equals about 45% of our building's income, well over the 5% limit in the state of California. Several other people are not paying because they either can't afford it or simply think it's too much. Both are valid. He can lien my unit all day and every day. I will go to court hearings about it and get it thrown out. Our HOA recall election was tonight. 5 seats on the board. Us individual homeowners put forth 3 candidates. The 3 of us spent many Sundays going door-to-door campaigning, and we did get a lot of neutral owners on board. With the ballots, you can either mail them in or fill them out in person. Most of us elect to mail them in, and there were 2 questions on them. First, do you approve of the recall election? And next, place your vote for the candidates in this grid. Unfortunately, several people skipped question 1, and approval for the recall was therefore less than 51%. The family of crooks that run our building now own 119 units out of the 180, and we just didn't get it. After the election, there was an HOA meeting. I find these things an absolute waste of time, a stupid meeting ran by stupid people, but I did show up about 20 minutes late for about 10 minutes, and a literal fistfight almost broke out, and the family announced that, even though I have a seat on the board, they are no longer including me in meetings because I am disrespectful. People literally started screaming. Another owner made an audio recording of the whole thing, and I sent it along to our attorney. Our HOA bylaws require mediation before litigation, and so we have that coming up, in which we are asking for a large sum of money, our attorney fees, and this family to give up their positions of power and have their voting rights stripped permanently. If they refuse, we go to litigation, and a judge will subpoena their financial records, which will show laundering, embezzlement, theft, and God knows what else. So I have a pretty good feeling that they'll accept to avoid the alternative potential prison. Also, the house I put the lien on still hasn't sold, so I still haven't gotten my $31, and our elevators still don't work. Next update, I took the advice of some commenters and reported this family to the IRS. I sent an email to our internal email Google group that I manage and that has all the other owners on it with a link to print out the form and an invitation to do the same. 3 days later, I was served with a cease and desist regarding defamation. I found out later that Jerkboy threatened another tenant into forwarding the email to him. I have informed our attorneys of this. I regarded the cease and desist as a type of slap and promptly disregarded, as there is never anything wrong with cooperating with a government agency. I've not yet heard anything else regarding this. Our CC&Rs require alternative dispute resolution before jumping to litigation, or ADR. We decided to go that route, and our attorneys, angels really, put together a 130-page document outlining each and every fart these people have made within their collective lifetimes, complete with numerous pages of exhibits and so on. In our demand, we ask for either complete building refurbishment or $5 million in cash to be stripped of their positions of power, and our attorney fees, which are so far about $22,000 at this point, raised through crowdsourcing within our building. This was served to them last week, and they have 30 days to respond. If they don't respond, we go directly to litigation. As a judge will subpoena every bank record for the last 20 years or so, which may uncover evidence of crimes, we feel that the Jerk and Company should feel very inclined to accept our offer. In the meantime, I got my rhinoplasty a few weeks ago. Guess which major US city I live in, and it's absolutely scorching here. Our water went out for 7 hours on Sunday, and with it, our AC as well as our HVAC units are liquid cooled. They got fixed Sunday night, and now the water just stopped working again. Nobody knows why, and as it's the middle of the night here, nothing can be done. My monthly HOA dues are due today, so I'm going to fork over $400 for what? Additionally, I made it clear that I wasn't paying the second special assessment, but I've continued paying my regular $400 monthly dues. However, they've been putting that money towards the special assessment and charging me a late fee for the remaining special assessment balance, as well as a late fee for each month for each unpaid monthly dues. Double compound late fees are illegal here, and when I reached out to the Jerk secretary, she told me that it was just how our bill pay system works. They're trying to get my balance up to $1,800 so they can foreclose, which is the minimum amount required in my state. The attorneys are aware, so we shall see. He has less than 3 weeks remaining to reply to our ADR. This may have to move over to Pro Revenge at that point. And the $20 million house still hasn't sold, so I still haven't received my $31, which is clearly the real issue here. This email says check for $31. You'll receive a check for $31 via FedEx in the next few days. I'll forward the tracking number as soon as available. I expect that you'll record a satisfaction of judgment once the check clears. I believe I sent you that form earlier. Here's the newest update. So, no surprise here, our overlords did not respond in time to our ADR, so we have no choice but to file a formal lawsuit, which our attorneys are putting together now. A few other things have happened. So a guy who lives in a different building that was once owned by these same people organized a protest at our overlord's house. He put the message out the day of, and only the 2 of us showed up. No bother though, there were 6 cops there too. He found out about it and fled the area with his family, and the cops were super cool to us, explaining that we have the right to protest, we just can't be in possession of baseball bats or Molotov cocktails, and they were like, we're just going to stand off to the side. You guys can protest as long as you want. We just have to make sure there's no rioting and no trespassing. Well, it was just the 2 of us, so we ended up leaving, but it was hilarious. Back in my building, there was a tenant they're trying to evict, and so the overlord did as overlord does and cut a hole in the wall from the hallway and burst a water pipe to flood them out. The elevator bank on 5 floors was flooded along with several units on several floors. This is highly illegal, and the attorneys are aware. The next day, the water had to be shut off all day for emergency repairs. Then, I was contacted by a real estate agent who does a lot of work in our building, and he told me that the overlord let our building master hazard insurance lapse. He called the insurance company, and they said that the overlord hadn't even attempted to renew it yet, and if it lapses, it will be at least 30 days before a new policy can be put into place. Now, well, on October 1st, it lapsed, and we all got letters from our banks telling us that if we don't get a master hazard plan stat, the banks will get one on our behalf and add it to our mortgages. Turns out, this kind of plan is like $300,000 to $450,000 a year, and it can't even be purchased by individuals. So I don't know what our banks think that we can do, but that's not even the best part. 2 days ago, in the middle of the night, some huge leak or something happened on the top floor, and it flooded our building all the way to the basement, 1 unit on each floor straight down. Our CC&R state that plumbing and electric inside the walls is the responsibility of the owner. A clause that is likely unenforceable as condo is a legal definition and descriptor, and our HOA insurance policies only cover what is within our units and not in the walls. This created an uproar among those affected, and I told them that if they want any resolution, it's probably going to have to be handled in the courts, and that they're welcome to join our class action as a named plaintiff if they want to address this issue directly as part of it. Some are thinking about it. Our attorneys, in the meantime, told us that they believe they have found RICO violations, aka racketeering and organized crime. They said that they're going to cooperate with the FBI and the DA and the AG, but any criminal aspect is out of their control and will be handled by those parties. They also said that if it is determined that RICO violations have occurred, we get 3 times our claimed damages. I hope to bring the final chapter of this to Pro Revenge or Nuclear Revenge. What'd you think of that brand new update? Let me know. Landlord is jealous of my income, raises my rent $500. I screw him years later for $20,000. Posted by Rocky Moose. In the late 90s, wife and I were just married, just getting started, and we decided to dink, double income, no kids, for a few years to save up for a down payment on a house. The dot-com bubble was still rising, and I was a newly minted software developer. I had an entry-level job for a while, and then got recruited to a new city and a new job that paid 3 times what I was making before. It was an offer too good to pass up. I ran the numbers, and it was a no-brainer. By living frugally and saving my entire salary, living off just her income, we would easily have enough in a year to put 20% down payment on a new house. We rented an apartment in the new city that was listed for $950 a month. The landlord was a real estate agent who owned a 2-bedroom condo as an investment property. Let's call him Hank Wazowski. Hank was a thin, gray, no-nonsense guy. He was pleasant enough, but perfunctory, dry, and had no sense of humor. He made a point of explaining that under no circumstances was he responsible for maintaining the garbage disposal and that it was not included in the rental agreement, and he would not be responsible for fixing it were it to break. Okay. He seemed slightly amused by us, a clueless young newlywed couple, but I could tell he wanted to rent to us because we were very obviously a safe choice as renters. We filled out the rental agreement and the credit check, and this is where my troubles began. Hank looked hard at the credit application where I listed my job title, software developer, and my income, $75,000. For a 23-year-old in his second year out of college in the late 1990s, this is a small fortune. Throw in my wife's salary, and we were over 6 figures in income renting an apartment far beneath our means. Like I said, Dink is the way to go when starting out. "I can't believe how much money you make," Hank must have said a half a dozen times, muttering under his breath. I explained we were saving to buy a house and that we were only going to stay in the apartment a year. We might stay a few months after the term is over. Would month to month be okay after a year? Hank assured us that would be fine. We saw Hank only once during the year, and he again mentioned my salary and how he couldn't believe that's what software developers were making. It was awkward, and I gave a vague reply. Anyway, a year later, we had found a house to buy, signed all the papers, and were making plans to move. The new house wasn't going to be ready until 2 months after our rental lease was up, so I called Hank to ask if we could, as discussed, simply extend the lease by 2 months before moving out. Hank assured me on the phone it would be no problem, and he would send over an extension for us to sign. The extension arrived in the mail, and it included a month-to-month clause and a $500 increase in the rent. I flipped out and called him. "Hank, why are you increasing the rent over 50%? That's too much. That's more than my new mortgage is going to be." He was super condescending to me. "Rocky Moose, it's what the apartment goes for now. I would be losing money by renting it for less." I tried to reason with him, but it was very clear he knew we could afford the $500, had no choice in the matter, and he was going to screw us over as best he could. He got angry with me for arguing my point, and I'll never forget his parting words. "You don't have to like it, Rocky Moose. You just have to pay it." My wife and I tried to figure out a way to move out early by putting our furniture in storage for a couple months and crashing with friends, but it just wasn't going to work out. I swallowed my pride and wrote out the check for $1,450 for the extra month. A month later, I wrote a similar check, and then we moved out. I made sure the apartment was spotless before moving, but Hank still withheld $300 from our security deposit for BS things that were just a way for him to squeeze a few more dollars from the kids who made too much money. $100 for cleaning, sure, but $300 was obscene. In my mind, he had screwed me over for $1,200 and there was nothing I could do about it. What made it even more infuriating is that I saw the ad that Hank put in the paper after we moved out, and he listed the apartment for rent at only $150 more than we'd been paying originally, not the grossly inflated $500 increase, and it didn't rent. A month later, I saw the same ad, and he had lowered the price to $75 more than we'd been paying, and I assume it got rented since the ad stopped appearing. Fast forward about 5 years. Life is good, the house is good, we have a baby, and even though the dot-com bubble has burst, I'm still employed. One day, out of the blue, I overhear one of my coworkers, Phil, a senior developer, talking to the guy working the reception desk. "Hey Mike, I'm expecting someone to drop off some paperwork for me. If a Hank Wazowski asks for me, tell him I'll be right out." I freeze and get a taste of bile in my mouth, remembering how I had to write out that name on those checks all those years ago. There's no way it's the same guy, right? I walk over to Phil, who is still by the reception desk. Hey Phil, I say, how do you know that name, Hank Wazowski? Phil explains that Hank is his real estate agent. I bought my condo through him several years ago. I'm selling my condo now so I can buy a house, so I'm going to ask him to be my agent again. Do you know him? I tell Phil that I used to rent an apartment from Hank and described what he looks like. Phil confirms the description. It's the same guy. Wow, small world, right? And on cue, right then, the front door to the office opens and in walks Hank Wazowski. I stare in disbelief. He's carrying a folder of papers and doesn't recognize me. Phil and Hank shake hands and they talk for a few moments. I stand there, silently, wondering what to do. Phil finally says, Hank, this is my friend Rocky Moose. I think you may have already met. Yes, hello Hank. Good to see you again. My wife and I were your tenants a few years ago on Main Street. Remember, the software developer who rented for a year saving to buy a house? Well, this is where I work. Here, with Phil. Hank's eyes indicate he now remembers me and he's starting to put it all together. We shake hands and he says, yes, of course he remembers, and asks how we're doing. Oh, we're just fine, thanks for asking. Phil says you're his real estate agent. Small world, isn't it? Hank nods pleasantly. He still doesn't remember the details of our last conversation. I do some quick math in my head. This is the early to mid 2000s. The real estate market is very strong and easy money for any agent. The crash of 2008 is still a few years in the future. I start to think out loud. Let's see, selling the condo for around $150,000 to $200,000, and you're looking at houses in the $500,000 range, so that's $650,000 to $700,000 in total transactions. An agent getting 3% on the sell and the purchase is getting around $20,000 for his trouble. That's good commission for the agent, isn't it? Hank's eyes flash, and I can tell he remembers everything about me now. Phil is surprised at my passive-aggressive tone, and I am enjoying the uncomfortable silence. Hank deflects my question, saying it's complicated, and tells Phil to send back the papers as soon as possible. He shakes hands with Phil, looks at me, nods, and goes to leave. It was really good to see you again, Hank, I call behind him. He exits the building. As the door is still shutting, I say a bit too loudly so that Hank can hear. Hey Phil, don't sign anything just yet. I have a story to tell you. Phil looks at me and says, Rocky, what the heck was all that about? He looks PO'd and confused at my behavior. I tell Phil the whole story, the rent, the $500 increase, the security deposit, the you don't have to like it, you just have to pay it, everything. Phil, you can't use this guy to sell your condo and buy a house. I hate him. He is evil. I'll help you find another real estate agent. Just use anyone but Hank. So the great thing about Phil is that, well, he's a great guy. He says he's a little surprised at my story and has always known Hank as a straightforward guy. But I totally see him doing that to you, he admits. There's no way I could use him now. What a jerk. Then Phil's eyes lit up a bit. What do you want me to say when I fire him? I have special feelings for Phil now. We came up with a plan and I made sure there were some key phrases in Phil's repertoire. We planned it all out together in advance. My only regret is that I didn't get to see Hank's reaction in person a day later when Phil made the following phone call while I stood behind him listening. Hi Hank, it's Phil calling. Yeah, about that. I've decided to get some other quotes from other agents. I'm not going to sign up with you. Pause. No, you shouldn't give a discount. You'd be losing money if you did that. Another pause. No, this is just a decision I've made. No, it has nothing to do with Rocky Moose. Pause. Well, you don't have to like it, Hank. You just have to accept it. Goodbye. Click. And it was the greatest revenge I could have ever imagined. Through a chance meeting years later, Hank got screwed out of $20,000 in easy commissions. And the best part is, Hank absolutely knew it had everything to do with Rocky Moose. Keeping me up at night with your parties? Enjoy being shamed on the national news. Posted by, I hope I don't butcher this, Vlokinen Ventilurin. I'm sorry if I did. In September of 2020, the apartment next to mine was let out to two young women, both students. After they settled in for a bit, it turned out that they wanted to have a party. No big deal, except Belgium was in full lockdown at this point due to COVID, and you were supposed to have only one fixed visitor over. But then again, to be young again and so on, so I didn't really care. During this time, I was working in healthcare. I work with the mentally disabled, but I volunteered for the ad hoc COVID team, meaning that I got called upon to tend to those residents who were sick and needed quarantining or were effectively diagnosed with COVID. This meant pretty long working hours, and I spent about 10 to 11 hours a day at work with a full hour bike ride to and from work. Needless to say, I was pretty tired pretty much all of the time. So I wasn't looking forward to the noise from a party, but I'm pretty chill and I know that living in the city, some noise is to be expected. So they are having their party and I can stand some noise and music. But this party was freaking wild. People shouting full on, in the hallway, wrecking things and so on. And at about 4 in the morning, I introduced myself to the neighbors and asked them when they could expect their company, about 20 people or more, to leave. And if they could refrain from having a party the next day, as I have to get to work and get up at 6 every day. So they promised they would keep it down the rest of the night. They didn't, and that they would not have a party the next day. Plot twist, they did have another party, and then they had one the day after. At this point, I'd been going on a full 3 nights without sleep, and I was nearing neurosis. Every night I had talked to the girls, and every night they would be full of apologies and stuff, but nothing would change. I also felt terrible when I had to enter their place because it would be absolutely packed with people, and I work with some very vulnerable people at work who I wouldn't want to spread COVID to. This was pre-test, pre-vaccine, pre-much of knowledge that we have now about COVID. Luckily, the weekend came and they went to their parents and I could recover a bit. Suffice to say, I wasn't really liking my new neighbors. During the next few weeks, they refrained from big parties, but they would have a constant flood of people just coming over during the night. And by constant, I mean constant. Like their bell would ring 70 times a night and people would just always be coming and going. And those people would be drunk and loud. Our communal hallway is pretty much an echo chamber because it's all stone and any noise will travel throughout the building. Basically, I couldn't rely on sleeping at night, and it drove me crazy. I could only sleep Friday through Sunday because then they would go off to their parents or whatever. I could not grasp how they could know this many people that would always be coming and going. During one night, while knocking on their door to complain about the noise, I encountered my upstairs neighbor, who's also on Reddit. Hi. And decided that we would have to join forces to get this to stop. My neighbor told me some important bit of information. The reason there were people coming and going all the time was because they used their apartment as a makeshift bar and hangout. During this time, bars were closed due to COVID, and all of those students were using the big apartment to hang out. Moreover, across the street was another frat house with 5 boys living there, and that too was a secret hangout. So people would hang out at those 2 places and cross the street if they wanted a different atmosphere or wanted to see their other friends or whatever. And the boys from across the street would also come over 15 times a night. Most visitors seemed to be law students or affiliated with them. Basically, our communal hallway was just a part of their cafe space now. So we tried talking to the girls, and then we started to talk to the visitors. None of them had any sympathy for us when we were asking them to just be quiet at 4 in the morning. Most of them just laughed at us, as we were the pesky neighbors, no doubt. Even more of them were just so wasted that they didn't know what they were doing. So we started calling the police dozens of times. Most of the times, they weren't let in and police told us they couldn't do anything. We kept calling as we wanted a record of our calls in the system. Belgium was still in full lockdown at this point, and what they were doing was full-on illegal. Even so, police told us their hands were tied if they would not open the door. When the police couldn't help, I turned to the next best thing. I'm a social worker, and so I have no problems looking up information and calling around to look for help. And this is what I did. Most places, like student unions, police, and town hall, were understanding, but they couldn't really do much. So I acted on the suggestion of the upstairs neighbor and contacted one of the girls' deans. I shot him a nice email about sorry to have bothered him and taking up his time, but I had this big group of students from his faculty ganging up every night, and maybe he wanted to know about it since they were breaking every possible COVID rule that existed at that time. Especially since me and my neighbor were about to go to the papers with this story, as secret lockdown parties were becoming a thing in the papers at this point. This dean called me back right away, and we had a nice talk about our problems. He told me he was on it. So basically what he did was call the law student girl and her parents. Big drama ensued, and we finally got to sit down with the girls, and they finally sounded like they were sorry. Tears were shed, for which I had no patience, to be honest. And we learned that the police had actually been inside a few times, and they were issued tickets for having secret parties. Those were 300 euros each a pop, so I had no idea why they didn't just stop. We learned they were not happy because the dean had called them up at 11 o'clock and they were still asleep. To which I said, well, there's your problem. You're still asleep at 11 o'clock. I'm up at 6 every day, and you girls haven't been a bit understanding about that. So we got to feel a bit like we got our revenge, and we got to vent, but we kept it kind of nice and parted in good terms, hoping that this would be it and we could live together as nice neighbors. But if that were the case, I wouldn't be here, right? You'd think that they would have gotten the point now and would refrain from making noise and partying. Well, you'd be wrong. Basically what they did was they moved to the frat house across the street and started partying there. There were slightly less people running to and fro, but the noise was still a problem, and we were now in the middle of the second COVID wave, and these people were meeting up with big groups like crazy, while I hadn't seen a soul in almost a year. Never mind the people at my work who were forbidden from even going to their own friggin' family. The whole thing was just ridiculous. My upstairs neighbor happened to film such a party across the street and had sent the clip to me. We were thinking about going to the press with our story, but we weren't really sure if it would be a good idea. So I posted the clip of the party on the subreddit of our country to test the waters. It got quite some comments and upvotes, and it seemed that most people were also sick of people disregarding the rules and having secret parties. After some talks with the upstairs neighbor, we decided to contact the press and simultaneously go up a step in the university hierarchy and contact the vice rector that had the power to start up a disciplinary case against the students. Now this person is one of 12 vice rectors for a total campus of about 15,000 students, so quite high up. Things moved fast. Local news actually picked up our story from Reddit and contacted me, and we gave some background info. They confirmed with the police that cops had been there dozens of times to their address and across the street and weren't let in most of the time. We mentioned that the university was involved and that we had hoped they would finally intervene. The next day, the piece was on their website. It went viral there and got promoted to the sites of most national newspapers. Its headline was sensational enough, mentioning the dozens of times police had showed up and also mentioning how healthcare workers were being kept up by selfish students. At the same time, the vice rector contacted us to take our statements, which we had already prepared up on paper, and informed us that they would investigate and could possibly start up disciplinary actions. At the same time, more reporters were contacting me throughout the day, and we made sure to mention that to her and link the university the printed articles. The next day, while at work, I got a message from the upstairs neighbor that a film crew from the national news was at our doorstep. He declined to talk to them, and I would have done the same since this was getting pretty big now, but they made a segment anyway. Yeah, and sure enough, that night at 7, here was my street and a short section about cops standing in front of a closed door a dozen times, and the local press cop talking about the troubles of closed doors. Best part about it was that a student from the offending frat house across the street had let the film crew in, and it said on camera exactly what we were accusing them of towards the university, that they had been having parties and didn't let the cops in, and that they had done it multiple times. No idea what made him think that was a good idea. Anyway, trying not to make a huge story even longer, the press died down sometime later, thank goodness, and the disciplinary action from the university went through. Before the hearing, we sat down with the girls from our block and cleared some things up. We wanted to live like normal people together, and we tried to make some amends. Because we put in a kinda good word for them, they got the lighter end of the stick. 40 hours of community service and some probation. The guys across the street got 80 hours each, and each had to write us a letter of apology, which I thoroughly enjoyed reading every time I got one. The sad part is, most of them sounded just like dumb young kids, but that was after getting called out on the news and being part of a disciplinary action. But we never wanted to escalate things this far. Some noise is to be expected when living in the same building, and we were never going to these extremes for some expected noises. But these people went to the extremes, and so we were forced to do the same. The rest of the year, a simple message on WhatsApp was enough to silence any noises we had coming from their apartment. If anything, I hope they learn that even very polite and chilled people can become very upset when presented with sleep deprivation and excessive noise. My HOA complaint inadvertently broke up an entitled mother Karen's marriage by Moonbeam19. Do dog moms count? This happened a few years ago, but I still think about it. After being blessed with great neighbors over the years, I then started taking it for granted. And then Luna, her 4 dogs, all the same breed, and family, 2 teens and a husband, move in the house next door. It started off well enough. Luna was friendly and the kids and the husband seemed nice. But she soon decided that the best place for her dogs to go potty was my backyard. I didn't agree, and after suffering in silence for a few weeks, I'm not very confrontational, I finally told her that my backyard wasn't her personal dog park. When they got home from work, they would let their dogs loose to go running in my backyard to play and go potty. One day, I happened to catch them and came out on my patio to tell them to cut it out. The dogs turned around and started running towards me while barking aggressively. Fortunately, her husband called them off before the little ankle biters got to me. And it wasn't just the dog that liked to hang out in my backyard. Luna liked to walk around my backyard while talking on her phone. One of the things I like about my house is the privacy. It backs to woods, so I don't have a lot of curtains on my back windows and doors. But since Luna liked walking around my yard, I was forced to curtail my habit of cleaning while scantily dressed. And it was creepy. Once, after it had snowed, I realized that someone had walked up to my back patio and had been peeping in my French doors. Not long after, someone left a gift of junk on my front porch welcome mat. Geez, wonder who did that. But then, Luna seemed to want to repair our rather rocky relationship and asked me what time I got off work. We could do cocktails and hang out. I thought, whatever, Karen. So I told her, but no get-together ever materialized. I realized later that she just wanted to know what time I got home from work. What she didn't know was that I sometimes worked at home. On one of those days, I caught her once again letting the dogs loose in my yard. So I took a photo and I sent it to the HOA. I think she was also sneaking her dogs into my other neighbor's fenced backyard. The ramifications were swift. That complaint was the straw that broke the camel's back. The marriage was already on shaky ground, and the husband was tired of her and her dog hoarding. I only saw 4 dogs at the time, but there were more I didn't notice because they all looked alike. The next thing I knew, she and the dogs had moved back to South America. The kids went to live with relatives and go to college, and the husband was acting like someone who won the lottery. He always seemed somewhat grumpy before, but after she left, he was smiling and friendly. And then he bought a Harley, got a girlfriend, and proceeded to rid the house of copious amounts of urine-stained carpets. He was eventually evicted from the house, yes, they were renters, because the owners were sick of the complaints and the fines and decided to move back in. Luna had apparently a gift for ticking off the neighbors on my block. The weird thing is that there were a couple of vacant lots and a dog park less than a block away. But apparently, her neighbors' yards were the best place to take her dogs. I gotta know, do you agree with this comment? A lot of municipalities limit the number of adult dogs to a certain amount. Where I grew up, it was 3. She's also lucky the dogs weren't shotgunned for their aggression on someone else's property. This happened 12 years ago, and I am still reaping my rewards. I worked for the company. They did 3-phase photography, family and children photography, no wedding or events or anything, just straight up studio work that was in a portable setting. Sittings booked for 10 minutes, and we were supposed to shoot 30 to 50 a day. Yes, it is as wretched of a job as it sounds. It was fast, high energy, and at times simply brutal. 1. Pre-seller. They come in 2 to 3 weeks in advance and sell a special 10 by 13 portrait and book the appointment. 2. The photographer, that's me in this instance, comes in for about a week and takes the pictures. And 3. The salesperson returns 2 weeks later with the special along with the other 6 poses I took and tries to sell you $400 worth of pictures. I was very good at what I did. The company's sales average was $100 per customer per 50 customers. The more you shoot, the lower your quality because you spend less time taking care of details, and details sell pictures. My average was $175-ish per 150 to 200 customers. I was making this company a lot of money, and they consistently treated me like crap. Oh, the stories. Their business model was shoot as many sittings as you can, as fast as you can. To them, shooting 50 with a $100 average was better than shooting 35 with a $150 average, even though the profit margin was exactly the same. I never agreed with that, and boss and I went round and round about it every week. They withheld raises because I didn't have enough sittings and took my bonuses because I wasn't meeting their quotas. So I figured out how to be fast, efficient, and dang good. That's another post. So that's the background. Now the good stuff. Enter the jerk. The jerk is a pre-seller who lied to the customers, lied to the store, and would book appointments from 9 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. even though the studio hours were 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. He told every lie in the book, and I think he even added a few of his own. Want to bring your dog? Family of 15? Sure, bring 5 changes of clothes and I'll even have her do your makeup. I don't even do my own makeup. Come and get your picture taken and we'll throw in a free toaster. And just to make it interesting, he would triple and quadruple book appointments, and when he ran out of those, he would sell open appointments and tell people to just come in anytime and my photographer will work you in. Oh, just writing that makes me mad after all these years. The biggest problem was he would waive the sitting fee or just not tell him. I was obligated to collect that $8. Every time I didn't, it came out of my check and it was a freaking nightmare. I refused to work behind the jerk for these and 1,000 other reasons. I told boss that if they ever put me behind the jerk again, I would quit. Which is exactly what happened. They knew he had been working at the store I was assigned and they lied about it. I immediately called boss and told him this was my last week and that he needed to make arrangements to get the photography equipment at the end of the shoot. I should have walked out, but I was young and dumb. It was a 3-day shoot and I shot 316 customers by myself. That is an insane amount of sittings, and nobody was happy. Every night, the store manager had to tell my customers to leave because the store was closed. People were lined up at 9 a.m. waiting for me. I took so much abuse that week. After a customer threw a shoe at me and another spit on my pizza, the store security guard brought a chair over and he stayed with me almost the entire time I was there. I honestly can't remember how many people were escorted out of the store because they acted a fool in my studio. It's been over a decade and I still have nightmares about that week. But nobody came to get the equipment, so I start making phone calls and plotting. I say, hey, so what do you want me to do with your equipment? Boss says, you're gonna need it next week in Florida. No, because I quit. You didn't give me any notice, so I am not accepting your resignation. I am sending you to Florida next week. Hey, I'm an independent contractor, remember? You can't make me go to Florida. This is not complicated. I quit. That's another post. Just go to Florida. I don't have any time for this now. You can quit in 3 weeks if you can hire a replacement. And he hangs up. Nope, not going to Florida. I packed the equipment and took it home with me. The camera was a brand new Canon T2i 550D, and those were pricey back in 2010. I really didn't want to give it back, but it wasn't mine to keep. I had an idea. Boss was an absolute train wreck of a human. If he didn't want to do something, he wouldn't. If he could find someone else to do it, he would. I decided to use his own worst traits against him: avoidance and procrastination. The next thing I did was take the company credit card and go to the nearest storage unit with climate control. I rented a unit and paid for the first month, but just one. I unloaded it all, down to the last halogen light bulb. I took detailed pictures of everything and an inventory. I locked the door and I walked away. At this point, there was nothing I could do but wait and hope that Boss would continue to be the worthless wreck I knew him to be. Next, I called and reported the card stolen. Why? Well, because I knew if I didn't, that card would remain active and rent would be paid every month on time, and that just wasn't going to work for me. I cut it in half and sent it and the combination to the storage locker to Boss via FedEx, along with a hand-painted sign that said, "I quit." I also sent an email to HR telling them that I was terminating my contract and that Boss had the information on the equipment. This is probably the only sketchy thing that I did. The person I emailed was out on medical leave, and I knew it. I could have sent that email to a dozen other people who work there, but they might have paid attention to it. By the time she got back to the office, she had so many emails she couldn't even begin to tackle them all. A month goes by and the police knock on my door. Okay, so I wasn't expecting that. The company has reported the equipment stolen and the police are there to investigate. I really thought I was going to jail. The cop that knocked on the door was fully expecting to take me away in handcuffs until I explained what was going on. I ended up taking copies of the emails to the police department, as well as my copy of the contract with the storage unit. I also had a copy of the shipping label. Both my name and the company were listed on the contract. I had to make an official statement and jump through some hoops, and the company had placed a monetary value of $12,000 on the studio rig, so potentially I was in a lot of trouble. Except I covered my butt. The police told me I was in the clear because the storage unit had their name on the contract, their credit card was used to pay for it, and I had sent the combination and all the pertinent information to the company. I am very good at CYBWP, cover your butt with paper. At this point, I figure the gig is up because surely they're going to come and get this rig or send someone or something. Nope, Boss is still worthless. 2 more months go by. I get a call from the storage facility and they're about to cut the lock and auction the contents. I just about peed my pants, I was so excited. I called Boss again and he dodged my calls and ignored my emails to please call me immediately. I never specifically stated what I wanted to talk to him about, and just like I was hoping he would, he ignored me. Okie dokie, I've done all that I can. And that's when it all started to come together. And then I hit a pretty good snag, but it actually worked out better in the end. In this state, if a storage unit goes up for sale, the owner cannot purchase it at an auction. I didn't know that. But where there's a will, there's a way. They sent letters and called 3 more times, and then the date was set. The unit went up for auction on my birthday. My neighbor went to the sale and he bought the unit for $125, and I almost died. And of course, we were in cahoots on this, but we had to make it look like that we weren't. The pistol grip, the camera mounts cost more than that, not to mention the lighting, the props, and the costumes, and of course the camera. My neighbor then put an ad in the local paper for photography stuff, $1,000 firm, but didn't list anything specific, and oops, I put the wrong number in the ad. A week later, he wanted out of his garage, and then he sold it to me for $126. He has a bill of sale from the auction, and I have a bill of sale from him. It is now mine, and there is nothing the company can do about it. But they tried. I now have a fully functional photography studio, all the contacts I need to start my own business, and the skills to do it. I started calling all the stores I'd worked for the last 8 years and offered them a much better deal than what the company was giving them. I did my own pre-selling, my own photography, and my own sales. Except I took it a step further. I bought a monitor and computer and let people preview their pictures and order the day of the shoot. They paid in full and I mailed the pictures directly to them. People loved it. No high-pressure sales, no tricks. My customers were happy and so were my stores. About 6 months after my first independent shoot, I heard from the company. I got several nasty letters from them, which I ignored. Word had gotten back to them that I was using their equipment and that I was working for someone else. I just laughed at them. They thought so little of me that it never occurred to them that it was, well, my business. Then I got a nasty legal letter from a lawyer. It started with cease and desist, rolled into me violating the non-competitor's agreement, and ended with the return of their stolen property. They had apparently not told him all of the facts. I sent him copies of everything. I waited a few weeks for a response from him, and I heard, well, nothing. I finally called to find out what was going on, but no one was available to take my call. How convenient. A few days later, I got a certified letter in the mail saying, "No other legal action will be forthcoming from this office." I would have been content to just let it slide, but this whole thing ticked me off and now I wanted blood. I made a real effort to really hurt them. Little by little, I built my business and my reputation. I didn't have to do any of the nasty tricks that the jerk did. Within a year, I had stores and schools calling me. I had more work than I can handle on my own, so I took on a second photographer and then a third. I actually hired 4 people out from under their noses. At the height of my business, I had 8 additional photographers and a full-time office assistant. I could have grown much larger, and in hindsight, I am so glad that I didn't. Digital photography was a huge boon to the industry, and then it backfired. I found my niche in the market just as it exploded. I ran the company completely out of 3 states. They lost all of their chain contracts to me, including the store where it all blew up. The jerk lost all of his stores and ended up working at a gas station. The boss ended up demoted because his district was dissolved when I sniped out the contracts. The jerk actually tried to convince one of my photographers to hire him to do the pre-selling for her. By now, my name and my business name had a really good reputation. Boss left the company for good and used me as a personal reference. He was a good photographer, just a rotten manager. And I took great joy in telling the people who called me that I was legally not allowed to tell them what I thought of the man. The age of the cell phone camera pretty much destroyed traditional photography, and I closed my doors as a business in late 2017. The company closed for good in 2016, and I would like to think that I had a hand in that. I'm still standing, and they are nothing but an empty building. I still have that original rig, but the camera has been replaced several times. I do senior pictures and the occasional venue shoot. Most of my photography is for restaurant menus now, and well, people ask me if that's boring. I've never had a meatball scream and cry or kick me, which is pretty much a daily occurrence when you work with kids. This may not be as epic as some on here, but I beat them at their own game, and that still feels pretty dang good. Surprise HOA with updates posted by Happy Away From People. I bought my home in July 2022 in Kentucky. It's a home in a neighborhood and it was built 15 years ago. My neighborhood is big on young families, so about half, if not more, of the homeowners are not original. The neighborhood was developed by a builder very popular in the area. 2 weeks ago, everyone received a letter that our builders hired Omni, the devil, to oversee an HOA. The original homeowners said that they remembered this being mentioned when they bought the home. Everyone who bought a house from someone was not told this. It was not in our mortgage contract, and we were told no HOA. Because of this, several people have put above-ground pools, sheds, and porches, covered patios on their home. We all picked this neighborhood because it doesn't have an HOA. Now inspections are about to start, and we will get an annual fee. How is this legal? What can we do? Our neighborhood is so upset that we're trying to work together. First update. I've spoken to our agent who talked to Clear Title. Our HOA is not on our deed, nor the previous owners. They said that it could be on the master deed that the developer still has, but it usually is never needed in a closing, so it's never given unless special requests are made. I have a copy of our deed. Our next step is to discuss with the lawyer specializing in HOAs. We have proof that it was not disclosed to us, and the previous owners signed documents stating there are no HOAs. We are also not the only home in this situation. Our neighbors are experiencing the same frustrations. None of us have been asked to voluntarily join the HOA or to help establish one. The next update. This is not our first home purchase. Our previous home had an HOA. We signed documents and it was included in our closing. That is what I mean when I said our contract. Secondly, our agent is one of the top in the area, and she certainly didn't sell all the homes in our neighborhood. This is something not disclosed to multiple buyers over multiple years. It was a selling point of the neighborhood. People in my neighborhood have all been working together since the letter came to get answers. Tonight, we got some. The master deed and the covenants mentioning the HOA exist. The covenant was filed in 2014. There is no timeline. The title company did not do diligent work and they let half the neighborhood know. What does this mean? I don't know. The wording on the covenant says that anyone who purchases a deed in the neighborhood is automatically a member of the association. Automatically. That's some BS right there. Luckily, our house hasn't had any huge additions in our yard. My neighbor is elderly and just saved all his money working out of retirement, cutting corners to purchase and install a very large shed to do his hobby work. My other neighbors purchased a home with an above-ground pool and deck and shed already installed. This is gonna get nasty and expensive for my neighbors. I wish I knew how to upload redacted documents to show you guys the ridiculousness of this situation. I wish there was better buyer protection, and I feel like the best chance now is to get on the board when we can and to solve it. Unfortunately, Omni and my builder are notorious for staying stuck in the stage of HOA established and handing it off to the neighborhood. It may be years. The newest update. I've now spoken with Omni. Here's what I've learned. They believe the HOA was kicked into high gear because a neighbor or two has been complaining about a boat or RV. She couldn't say, but said it was made a priority in inspections. It's always a Karen over a silly thing. And there had been a secret board all along. It's been employees of the builder. The builder has 55 more houses to build. They plan to release the HOA to residents when it nears completion. No one, not even the builder, has a date for that. This builder has been mentioned in comments below, and the builder was supposed to maintain the common spaces since the building began. The common space is our entrance. A resident mentioned a playground and a pool was promised. Several older residents came forward to say that they have been doing the maintenance. There are no plans to have an HOA meeting with residents, despite me requesting one. All correspondence will be done individually by letter, email, or phone. Our neighboring neighborhood heard our issues and offered their HOA's lawyer's name to help us. We have another lawyer looking into it. He is not charging us a retainer. Would you lawyer up if you were OP, or would you try to handle it yourself? Because when it gets into this kind of matter, things can get a little messy. What do you think? Management company bought, auto pay canceled, late payments due, posted by JJR92 with updates in the comments. Apparently, in February of this year, the management company that runs my HOA was bought. I just got a bill from collections telling me that I owe the back payment, plus $90 in late fees and collection fees. I had been set up on auto pay for years and I'd never missed a payment. As soon as I got that, I contacted the new management company and offered to immediately pay all the back payments, but requested for the late fees to be waived. The phone call went very poorly, and I was informed that there was no way for the late fees to be waived, and the only options were pay the assessments, collection fees, and late fee, or hire an attorney. Yes, she jumped straight to an attorney when I asked if there was any other option. She said that all the statements were posted to the online profile and were mailed out. I didn't know the online profile had changed from our old one, and I don't think I missed any mail. I'm pretty good at opening important mail. Also, they had my email on file, and I can confirm that I was never notified by email. When I asked for any sort of confirmation that they were sent via snail mail, she said, "It's not my responsibility to prove that to you. It's your responsibility to make sure your dues are paid." I have a Facebook account that I only check it once every year or so, but I knew that our community has a pretty active Facebook group. After that call, I went on the group and I did a search for the new management company name. Horror stories all the way down. I paid the fees mainly because I don't have the time or money to fight over a $90 fee. So I'm mostly here to rant, but any suggestions would be appreciated. First update. OP says, "Thanks a ton for the advice. I already paid the fees because I was pushing up to that date that they were going to put a lien on the house. I know, probably more scare tactics, but they worked. I also found out that the board already voted to drop them and we're hiring a new management company. So while paying the late fee sucked, it's motivated me to get more involved. I'm going to start attending all the meetings I can, and there's an open seat that I might consider trying to get on. I can take an informal poll in our Facebook group. The rep on the phone said, when I asked for evidence, that they sent previous notices, so 90% of homes got them, but you just randomly didn't?" To which I replied, "Well, why did 10% of the homes not get them?" I think she was maybe just trying to make a point, but maybe it's an actual number that she didn't just pull out of thin air. Next update from OP says, "Well, the board is replacing the company. This new management company bought the old one. I think the board is handling it well with replacing them. It just seems like it's taking some time. I was on a call a few weeks ago when they were presenting new management companies. They seem to be doing a decent job. Yeah, my neighbor just stepped down from being in the board. Super nice guy, but with another change in management companies and trying to fill 2 board seats, I want to give them some time. As I said in another comment, this has made me want to get more involved and possibly try to get on the board. I just have 2 small kids and one on the way, so time is valuable right now, but seeing how bad this can turn so quickly has been a motivation. I almost had a lien placed and more. And they may have been sent, I can't really verify, but they did have my banking information and I know I didn't get any email about it, which I also know they had on file. As I said in another comment, the buck stops with me. I just personally don't feel like they made a good faith effort to remit payment, and when I called to try to make it right, there was zero working with me. What have I gotten myself into? Currently in inspection period for a new home in the HOA, posted by HOA Rogue. I've been looking for a house in Miami for the last year. I finally found an amazing house. The price was a bit high, but the house is 15 minutes from my work, it's large, and almost exactly what I wanted. The one negative: it's in an HOA. But this is simply a small gated community of 8 houses. The seller's broker said there aren't that many rules. The main point of the HOA is to maintain the gate, and the HOA hires gardeners to maintain all the front yard. All for a few $100 a year. It doesn't sound like the horror stories that I read on Reddit daily. So, our offer gets accepted, and my lawyer asked for the bylaws of the HOA while we are in the inspection period. After a few days, we get the amendments. But this isn't the main paperwork that we need. It takes 8 more days until we can finally get the primary HOA paperwork. We have no idea why it would take this long. The bylaws, in my opinion, well, aren't that bad. You bring in your garbage containers within 24 hours of pickup, quiet hours of 10:30 p.m. on weekdays and 12:30 a.m. on weekends. No chickens and roosters, no Airbnb, any assessments over $500 must be agreed on by the majority, and so on. I am older and past my partying years, so I'm all about the peace and quiet. There are additional rules that all the owners and tenants must be approved by the board, which is less great. I do like that there are no rules about adding a generator, colors a house may be, driveway rules, car must be in the garage, and so on. To me, this would be overreach. But my lawyer discovers that the HOA can't be making up most of the rules. The only thing they are allowed to govern, according to my lawyer after reading the paperwork, is the gate and common areas. He demanded that the board president answer how he thinks the board has the power to demand all of these rules. The lawyer is suggesting that the board has gone rogue. He is concerned about what other rules will the HOA come up with. We are now waiting for the response email. So now I am wondering if I screwed up. I have until Sunday, when inspection period ends, to make a decision. Did I mention that it's a really nice house? Important comments. Big one I see is requiring a membership vote for assessments over $500. That guarantees that the reserve fund will be underfunded and the HOA will be unable to pay for replacement of something that it's obligated to replace. It sounds like this is what may be going on. Once on the board, these people tend to develop an adversarial posture towards the other homeowners, imposing on the association their own personal standards of neighborhood appearance and homeowner deportment. They will micromanage your property through means of creative interpretation and outright embellishment of the CC&Rs. I forced 2 board members off of my HOA for thinking that they can pick on me in a meeting, posted by Brain Tumor Boy. I don't really pay attention to my homeowners association or HOA. It's a new community, under 2 years old, and I only went to my first meeting because a neighbor I've become buddies with told me that the HOA was being shady. My undergrad degree is in political science, so being a government structure and process nerd, I figured I'd check out the shenanigans for myself. At the meeting, one of the board members was being confronted about something that they had done. Initially, I had no clue what they were talking about, but by listening, I quickly understood the context and the scope. The board member responds to the questions by yelling and using pretty abusive language towards the residents who were asking him questions about what he did. That's a red flag. During his tirade, he told the people confronting him that he didn't answer to him. Second board member chimed in saying that we were powerless and repeats the "we don't have to answer to you." Second red flag. I'd had enough. I raised my hand, and the president, which is the nice board member and the good guy in general, recognizes me and he gives me the floor. Since it's my first time there, the fight paused and it got quiet. It was kind of weird. I simply but clearly told the 2 jerk board members that, in fact, we are the only people that they answer to in this role. The first jerk board member didn't like that and instantly threw abusive behavior towards me and started to try to bully me. Now, I'm a sleeping bear. I don't mess with anyone, but if someone messes with me, I make it my mission to let them know I can be the bigger jerk. After his response to me, another resident said to him, "We've lost faith in you. You should step down." The board member replied, "I've lost faith in you," which made absolutely no sense. A second resident said basically to step down or we'll recall you. The board member said, "You'll have to force me off." I then said, "Well, that's what we'll freaking do then, fine." In the next few days, I analyzed my state's HOA laws and my HOA's articles of incorporation, bylaws, and covenants. I realized the election of the 2 jerk board members was completely against the bylaws. So I wrote a demand letter to the HOA's attorney stating that the election of these 2 was in violation of our bylaws and they must be removed from the board. The attorney agreed with my analysis and the 2 members were forced off of the board. Anticlimactic, but go government structure and process nerds. Don't calculate a table's bills the moment you get their ordered ticket. It makes it hard to keep track. You got it, boss. Posted by Danver Santiago. For starters, I'm a 23-year-old university student working part-time at my aunt's restaurant to make a little extra moolah before the academic year starts. My job is pretty simple. It's an all-rounder job where I need to take people's orders, send tickets to the kitchen, calculate each table's bills, and handle payments and clear tables. Basically, I'm currently working part-time as a waitress. I'm only here until the end of this week because I secured another gig elsewhere before the academic year starts. So, hey, I figured why not finish this week for a little extra cash before then. I get along with most of the staff, all of whom are a decade or so older than me, and said individuals work at the restaurant full-time. There's another part-timer, he's 19, who's working here, and he comes to work whenever he's able since he's studying too. He wasn't around for a couple of weeks, so I've been left to sort out most waitressing matters. My shifts during lunch hour get particularly busy, which is why my system keeping the workflow super smooth is a crucial point to this post. The moment after bills have been settled, tables need to be cleared immediately because new customers come pouring in and some insist on being seated even before the tables have been cleared or wiped down. I came up with a system in the 3 weeks that I've been working here that works for both myself and my colleagues. Upon receiving tickets for orders that have been received, I always key in their order according to the table they're sat, so that it's less time consuming in the event that other customers want to settle their respective bills. Customers are expected to come to the payment counter when they're ready to pay, so this system is a lot easier and much more efficient than letting tickets pile up and only calculate the bill right when the customers are about to pay, which results in a longer line. I always make it a point to ask customers if their food has all arrived, if they were satisfied with the quality of their order, and if they ordered anything else that I hadn't seen on their tickets. Once they verify their orders are correct, that's all. I go about my day and mind my own business. That was until the other part-timer approached me earlier today. His point was an eyebrow raiser for sure. I'm not the type of person to pick fights or argue, so since he was so insistent that my way of doing things was making it difficult for him to keep track of additional orders at the table, I decided to just, let him have at it since he was so happy to tell me how to do my job. I simply smiled and nodded at him, making a beeline to the cleaning supplies and thinking to myself, you want to stop punching in people's orders? Sure thing. For a solid hour or two, I only collected the tickets, bringing them to the cash register and letting them pile up, just as he requested. When I noticed customers stand up from their seats and make their way to the payment counter, I would speed walk to the cleaning supplies and start collecting plates to show that my hands were occupied and that I wouldn't be able to sort out people's bills. I left it all to my dear coworker who tried telling me what to do and how to do it. It was the right call to make because the line that followed, due to his insistence on changing the system, snaked about halfway through the restaurant, full of customers waiting their turn to pay their bill. Once lunch hour had died down, I smiled to myself and went back to keying in people's tickets the way I always had. My part-time coworker sheepishly approached me with new additions to existing orders since then. Dead bird, posted by The Last Man Bear. So before I start the story, I need to give some background on my current job and my terrible boss. I work at an answering service. It's a company that handles the phones for several companies like plumbing companies, construction companies, and a few others. We handle the phones and take messages for them and page or text them out to the people working. On to my terrible boss. She is absolutely a greedy, horrible person and has no shame about it. She owns the answering service and also owns 5 other houses, one of which she rents out to someone. The office for the company is in shambles. The carpet was ruined from years of being walked on with no upkeep. The walls have holes in them, and the computers and equipment are incredibly old. I'm talking that some of the phones are still using 2000 old. She only has barely enough computers working for the employees to work on. There's maybe 10 or 12 old computers stocked up in the corner that don't work anymore. And she also treats the employees terribly. We'll have like 10 or 15 calls coming in at a busy time with one employee working, and she won't lift a finger to help. She'll just tell the employee to hurry up and yell at them when they can't handle the workload. Earlier this week, the computer at my station stopped working. Now I'm pretty sure it can be fixed, but my boss doesn't want to get it fixed. So instead of getting the computer fixed, she told me to go work out of one of her houses with a computer that has the necessary programs and equipment. The house she wanted me to go to is actually about 10 minutes closer to where I live compared to where the office is. So, yeah, whatever, I didn't make a big deal about it. She had me sign a non-disclosure form to not tell anyone about her house and included that I was not allowed to touch anything in the house. I was only allowed to touch the equipment that involved work. Again, I just thought, whatever, and she just signed it. So, into my story. I'm sitting at the desk earlier this week, and it was super slow, so I was reading a book. Then I notice her cat coming in from the doggy door with a dead bird in her mouth. So I call my boss, and the call goes like this. Hey, so your cat just walked in, and it had, "Don't you freaking dare touch my cat." But the cat, "If you touch my cat, I will fire you. You hear me?" Yeah, all right. And then I hung up. I did absolutely jack crap about it. On my way out, I glanced down the hallway and saw a pile of feathers and bird parts all over her bed, which I laughed so hard at. I'm finishing up school in the next couple of months, so I'm biting the bullet and finishing off before I quit, since I don't want to find a part-time job for a month. But when I quit, you bet I'm going to tell someone about the work violations. I quit the HOA and my home doubled in value, posted by Gerdon too. About 20 years ago, my uncle acquired and bought an apartment in a new fancy condo. Each floor was separated in 2 apartments, except for the top floor, which was a single apartment more than double the size, with a private attic. All other units had a storage area in the basement. He got the top floor. The building had a large common hall and a large yard all around it, so the owners decided to create an HOA to maintain the common areas and protect the property value. My uncle has always been an independent man, so he wasn't keen on the idea, but he recognized it was necessary. However, he proposed an article in the statute allowing any member to recede from the HOA by paying a contribution and entering a limited agreement. People under this contract would not be in the HOA, but would be required to contribute to common expenses like light, cleaning, administration, and so on, and maintenance, although in this case the HOA was required to confront their respective quotes for the job before proceeding. Since the votes were based on surface owned, and he thus had the swing vote, the rule was included in the statute. A couple of years go by without a hitch, and the HOA works as planned. A couple more units are sold, and everything is fine and dandy. Enter Karen. My uncle describes Karen as your worst high school teacher with a resting bee face like she was constantly smelling sewage. In reality, she was a plain woman in her 50s, dirty blonde, single, and a pocket dog and 2 cats, with a mildly annoyed expression frozen on her face and the fashion sense of Dolores Umbridge. Although after starting reading Reddit posts, I'm having a hard time not superimposing the classic Karen hairstyle on her. She was one of the original owners, but never had much interaction with the others. The first time my uncle took any notice of her was when she tried to introduce a rule preventing children from playing in the common hall because their rowdiness and the prospective damage they could cause might decrease property value. My uncle didn't like participating in the meetings, and he didn't have kids yet, but that time he intervened, saying that he'd rather have happy kids around, even if that meant losing a bit of value, and proposed creating an emergency fund for the accidental damage instead. Karen was outvoted. While they were leaving the conference room, she threw a look at him like she was about to breathe fire on him. He disliked and distrusted her from that moment on. Karen tried several times to pass more restrictive rules, but she kept getting outvoted, even thanks to my uncle's double vote. But at the same time, she was doing something else. She was buying additional units and forcing her rules onto her tenants, including those regarding the common areas. So that meant that her tenants' kids couldn't play with the other kids in the common hall. For instance, this one was nearly impossible to enforce, and it did lead to complaints. Over time, thanks to her by now 4 votes, Karen got a seat in the HOA. That was an alarm bell for my uncle, who filed to leave the HOA, as per his own article, on the same day. And not a moment too soon, as that article was canceled even before his request was processed. The HOA then initially denied his request, and he had to sue and go to arbitration to prove that he had filed his request before the rule was expunged. But from that moment, he was free. Over the next couple of years, he had to go to arbitration twice more. Once because the HOA demanded payment for a renovation without giving him the chance to present an alternate quote, and once because Karen and her newfound clique kept harassing him with fines that he didn't have to pay. He won both times, and Karen was beyond hate. Every time they met each other, she looked at him with such a contempt that he actually started fearing for his safety. In this period, Karen's increasingly restrictive rules had caused a high turnover, both of tenants and of owners. Even if everything was still in pristine condition, and Karen was very good at that, the HOA rules were a hard sell. This had decreased the value of the apartments a lot, and Karen used this to buy even more lots. She ended up with 6 total. When my aunt got pregnant, they decided that the condo was not really kid-friendly anymore, so they decided to sell. As I mentioned, the property value had dropped in recent years, but evidently not my uncle's apartment. When he put it on the market, he advertised it as free from the local HOA. He ended up selling it to one of the former residents for almost double the price for square foot than any other apartment in the building. Happy end? But wait, there's more. A couple of weeks after moving, my uncle received a call from the very distraught new owner saying that the members of the HOA are harassing him and that Karen has threatened to sue him because the HOA has a new rule that all new owners must sign up for the HOA. My uncle verbatim said, "So, you're not part of the HOA and you don't need to give a crap about the rules they make." The new owner pauses as he processes the information. Yes. They chatted a bit, and the new owner, after enduring for years, was quite happy about the prospect of screwing with Karen and the powerless HOA. Update. How come the building didn't have a board already? Someone asked. Well, apparently the company that built the condo had gone belly up sometime earlier with the building virtually complete, and the company that liquidated it wasn't really concerned with stuff like that, only recovering money fast. That left the buyers to manage the property by themselves, or they were delegated to do so. The HOA tries to force OP to follow rules that don't apply to them. They don't have to report to the HOA. Here's the story. My friends Jess, Megan, and I rent a house. We're all recent college graduates, young professionals, and we're decent roommates to each other and decent neighbors, as far as I can tell. The house we rent is part of a homeowners association, and the way that the laws work is that the HOA has a legal contract with the homeowner, and the homeowner who is leasing out a property has a legal contract with his tenants. But the HOA has no authority over the tenants legally. It's on the landlord to include the HOA rules in his lease with the tenants. Anyway, some of the HOA rules were in the lease, like only having cars parked in the garage and driveway, none on the street, and also no political signage in the front yard. But there were relatively few. The lease was pretty much your standard lease. Anyway, neighbors have come over several times to tell us about HOA laws that we're breaking. Not just the same few neighbors, there have been like 8. For example, they said we could not have junker cars in the driveway, and I was like, hey, it's not a junker. It runs, I drive it every day. Plus, you should be taking this stuff to the landlord. He's the homeowner in your association. The guy went off on me about how having cars like mine around lowers the property value, and I was like, my agreement was with the landlord. My lease says nothing about what cars that I can have. They don't like how my roommate has astrology wall tapestries over the windows instead of curtains, or how we have a fire pit outside, or how many friends that we have over even though we never break the rules about cars. Few of our friends drive. They told my roommate it's not allowed to do DIY projects like woodworking or car maintenance in the driveway, and told me about noise rules that do not line up with the city noise ordinance. They told my roommate her friends can't lock their bicycles up to the deck railing. Anyway, every time we tell these people that their contract is with the homeowner and our contract is with our landlord, we're following our contract, and their contract is between them and the landlord. And they've complained that the landlord's hard to get a reach of. He travels a lot and he's not communicative. And we are the ones living in the community and we need to follow its rules. And everyone's saying to just read your lease, it should say this or that. We've read the lease. It doesn't say a thing about the HOA even directly. My roommate also had a local lawyer look at the lease and the local laws. That's where I got the info about the laws in this post. I'm going to trust a lawyer who knows my area's laws over what Reddit thinks the law should or might be. We can't get these fines passed down unless they're for violating our lease agreement. We can't get evicted by our landlord if we pay rent and follow the lease terms. The HOA can't evict us either. Is OP in the right here for just disregarding the HOA rules since they're not really in it, or what would you do? Make me quit? Get reported for your illegal company practices. Posted by Paco the Fox. In all honesty, this account is mostly a throwaway to distance myself from my main account where I still talk to people in the area this happened. On one hand, given the time that's passed since this particular revenge happened, I could probably get away with it. But on the other hand, there's a chance that this could come back to bite me. It's not that I did anything illegal, but many may argue it was morally wrong at the time, and I probably could have handled the situation a whole heck of a lot better. So, on to the story. At one point in my life, I found myself bored. I needed spending cash, but at the same time, like any typical college student, I needed a job that would work around my class hours. Enter C Corp, not the real name. C Corp was a locally owned chain of gas stations in the southeastern part of Georgia and parts of Florida. I forget the total number of stations, but it was under 50 if that matters. I applied and was given a simple clerking position where I would work weekends and 2 nights a week, for a total of about 32 hours a week on average, sometimes more, sometimes less. I worked there for about a year when I was offered a position to help reopen a store that was renovated after a fire, with the promotion to assistant manager. My hours were going to obviously change, but by the same token, I gained better pay and a new day shift which would help things out. To be quite honest, I even debated taking some time off from school to concentrate on the job, as it was entirely possible I would be promoted to manager of my own store before long. There were veiled hints and suggestions of that very thing happening in a few months, as it were. I never got that far, but I'm getting ahead of myself here. It didn't take long for me to start noticing some issues with the store and the company as a whole. Issues which I did my level best to correct. We were nearing hunting season, turkey and then deer, and in an effort to cater to this, the store started getting in several pallets of ammunition. So, now we had to figure out how to display the various types of shells and bullets, while also doing our level best to ensure things didn't get in the way. It was around this time that I found myself speaking with the store manager, having been called on the carpet, as the saying goes, for refusing to sell ammunition to a customer. I explained to the manager that I had attempted to check ID on the customer, who refused to give it. So, I told the manager that I knew full well this was illegal, as ID was required by state law, and furthermore, you had to be 18 to buy them. That started me on the path that would lead to my termination a few weeks later. I started noticing company memos popping up in the office, all that dealt with company practices regarding ammunition. One even went so far as to say it was a terminable offense to refuse a sale of shells to a customer, regardless of age. That one actually vanished a few days after it went up, with me suspecting someone in the legal department realized the trouble they could get into with it. However, the flow of ammo didn't stop. A week before my termination, things got worse. The state in question has the lottery, of which the lion's share is scratch-off tickets. You know the type. Pay $1, scratch off, and hope you win something. Now, the lottery states on the back of every single ticket that the retailer who sold it must pay up to $599 in winnings. Anything above that has to be claimed at the central lottery office in the state's capital. Retailers are warned that should they refuse to pay this, there are instructions on how to do this with the money order, then they can be fined by the lottery commission, or worse. Imagine my surprise then when I'm written up for following the lottery commission policy and paying out on a $300 win for a customer. I was told, point blank, that company policy was not to pay out anything more than $100, regardless of what the lottery commission said. The final straw before my eventual termination, though honestly I quit, they still listed me as terminated, came up when training another cashier. The very next day, the count came up short by exactly $100. I refused to sign the write-up, which meant the company would have to investigate it, or so I thought. Same day, the district manager called the store and made some veiled threats about calling the police over this, and left me with a note that, quote, "If the count comes up $100 over today, he won't say anything," end quote. Oh, heck no, he didn't. I waited till the manager returned from her meeting, dropped all my keys on the counter, and told her directly, "I'm done." I walked out and didn't really look back. I was ticked. Ticked at the treatment I'd been given over my time working there. Ticked at being called a thief. Ticked at what I knew the company was doing to my little community. And ticked that as far as I could tell, they'd get away with it. That's when I hatched a plan of revenge. First and foremost, I needed to talk with a friend. One of my college buddies also worked for the county sheriff's office, So I plied him over with some good barbecue and a few beers, and then asked him, hypothetically speaking, what would happen to a company if it was found they were doing something illegal, like selling ammunition when they shouldn't be, or something like that. He knew I'd recently left C Corp and the circumstances of why I left, so it didn't take long for him to ask just what was going on. I spilled the beans, even including the reported theft I'd been accused of. He was on the edge of his seat, even going so far as to note that my district manager's actions itself were illegal, and told me to come meet with my friend's boss the next day to give a statement. So I did just that. I laid out everything, told about the memo, about not refusing sales against state law, and then gave detailed information about the DM's call, the incident itself, and the other things I'd witnessed regarding illegal practices by the company, though not mentioned here. It took the better part of 4 hours to get everything told and typed out. By the way the detective acted, I got the impression I had either given him one heck of a caseload or broken some case right open. Fun. However, I wasn't really done yet. I had one more call to make. That one would prove pretty simple and short, and involves me calling the Lottery Commission and telling them about the company's policy which went against the lottery agreement. I was assured they'd look into things and that my information would be kept secret. I just had to sit back and wait. The fallout. 2 or 3 weeks later, our local paper ran a story on the front page talking about a multiple department sting that happened in our area. The sting was investigating illegal sales of weapons, alcohol, and ammunition to minors. In that raid, C Corp had been hit hard, with several of their stores being shut and several managers and district managers being arrested on various charges tied to this illegal activity. The company was facing severe, in the 7-figure range, fines from the state, and it was being called into question whether or not they had the proper license to sell ammunition and pew-pews, as they're called, in the first place. The only mention about what the DM had said to me came in the form of one of the investigating officers noting that the company had resorted to blackmail in an attempt to silence anyone who dared question the company policy or practices. The stores did remain open, but you could tell that the managers were seriously nervous about what the future held. Sales of ammunitions and pew-pews stopped completely and overnight though. About a week after the raid by the police, lottery tickets of all kinds simply vanished from the stores. Big signs out front simply read, "We do not sell lotto." The validation machines were gone. The scratch-off ticket areas lay empty. Lottery was not in the building. I can only guess what happened in that case, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Lottery Commission sent people in with winning tickets only to have those people turned away. The fact that they lost their lottery sales would point to it being a serious issue at the very least. That or the Lottery Commission decided to distance themselves from the company, which was already under federal investigation. Yes, the ammunition and the pew-pews thing went federal. Ultimately, the company was a shell of its former self. About half the gas stations ended up closing due to no longer being profitable, and what stations didn't close were just shells of their former selves. The company eventually declared bankruptcy after a final scandal brought them another round of state and federal fines. In that case, they were busted for price gouging after raising the gas price per gallon to about $6 a gallon in cities where they had no other competition. This happening just prior to a pending tropical storm. Today, it's been close to 15 years since this all went down. C Corp doesn't exist any longer. After declaring bankruptcy, most of the stores were sold off to a competitor who ended up closing all but 5 or 6 of the stores due to redundancies. A whole host of, honestly, innocent people ended up out of work simply because the store decided to F over one guy who wanted to do the right thing by law and state policies. Several of the corporate staff were given 2 and 3 year suspended sentences, while others ended up paying personal fines on top of what the company was facing. The company has become something of a warning to others about what not to do when an employee voices a concern, and above and beyond that, why it's a good idea to follow the letter of the law exactly as it's written, regardless of if it hinders your bottom line or not. I sometimes think back on the whole affair and wonder just what they hoped to achieve with that blackmail attempt. Some part of me thinks that the DM honestly thought it was the best option and may have even been trying to help out an employee he liked. That was something that always bugs me looking back. Every interaction I had with the guy was a good one, right up to him grooming me to be another store manager. So maybe he was trying to protect me. Then again, he could have just been the a-hole that I assumed, and that was him showing his true colors. I guess we'll never know. He moved out of the area a few years later, and I sure as heck wasn't about to talk to him again. Not after everything that had happened. Evil Stepfather, posted by Kveldson. When I was 15, my mom started dating a man she met on a dating website. I didn't like him the first time I met him, and 2 months later, he moved into the house. About 3 weeks after he moved in, he took my skateboards, self-built half-pipe, ramps, BMX bike, ice hockey gear, and many other things to the dump one day while I was at school. He said he did this because he didn't want all of my crap cluttering up his garage. Maybe 2 months later, he punched me in the stomach for the first time because I got up from the dinner table without asking to be excused. From there, it escalated into full-fledged beatdowns for the smallest perceived slight to his authority. One day, he decided to take my extensive Pokemon card collection, even more extensive comic book collection, my Game Boy and PS2 with all the assorted games, and my fantasy and sci-fi book collection, and got rid of all of it, because 15-year-old boys should be playing football and baseball, not being a bundle of sticks nerd playing Pokemon cards, reading comics and books. I would like to add that he was a middle school teacher, and then his off-time refereed and umpired local middle and high school sports games. My mom never intervened, and in fact, acquiesced when he demanded that she stop giving me lunch money because the little jerk would just spend it on comics and other crap. One day, I took maybe $3 and change out of his change jar so that I can buy a slice of pizza and some fruit punch during lunch at school because I was tired of being hungry. My twin sister was always a bit of an a-hole and frequently blackmailed me into doing her chores from a young age. I was fed up and refused to do something, so she told him what I'd done. This man actually called the police and pressed a larceny charge against me, and once the police had left, beat me senseless. At that point, I ran away. When the cops found me and returned me to my home, I found out that he'd been trying to talk to my mom into sending me away to military school or something of that nature. I ran away again, and between having run away several times and the larceny charge, ended up turning 16 in juvenile detention. I spent the next couple of years being miserable and afraid, frequently contemplating permanent self-harm. Once I left home, I didn't speak to my mom for several years. We eventually reconciled, and by that point, they had married. I was a lot bigger then, as I had been a young teenager and had gotten into weightlifting, so he no longer acted like he was going to punch me to make me flinch, much less actually hit me, and we basically avoided each other for the most part. My mother found out that she had stage 4 cancer and no longer wanted to waste any of the time she had left with him, so she had a lawyer draft up a separation agreement whereby he would receive a set amount of money upon separation and would have 45 days to retrieve his belongings from the house. He had spent his entire inheritance in 6 months and then had to sell his mother's house that he grew up in order to settle his debts shortly before they started dating. Oh, and my mother bought the house back from the bank before they married. She allowed him to keep the house and he moved back into his mother's house. My mother passed away about 9 months after their separation, and despite the agreement, have been allowing him to come and get his stuff piecemeal. I put an immediate end to that. I sold his baseball card collection, which was worth around $14,000, and his autographed sports memorabilia, roughly $11,000, and also sold all of his woodworking equipment, along with several finished pieces of furniture that he had made, around $6,500, I think. I kept his mother's engagement ring, a platinum band, 3 diamonds, roughly 2 carats, a wedding band, his coin collection, as I also collect coins, and some tools and other odds and ends. Around a month ago, I ran into him at the grocery store. I told him what I had done as he was pushing his cart out towards the car, and he took a swing at me multiple times. Several of these punches missed, and the ones that did connect didn't have much effect because he's nowhere near as strong as he was 20 years ago in his 40s, and I'm no longer a skinny little 15-year-old. He continued to try to punch me as I called 911 and was actively ramming his grocery cart into my new Toyota as the police officers pulled into the parking lot. He was arrested for assault, communicating threats, and destruction of property. As a result, he lost his job and pension at the local middle school, and because he had never learned how to save money while married to my somewhat wealthy mother, ended up having to sell his mother's house because he hired an expensive lawyer, thinking he could somehow beat the charges. My nephew, who was on the football team, made it well known to his friends that he not only had just been arrested and convicted of assault as well as other charges, but that he had also beat me as a child, caused several parents to call for him to resign from refereeing and umpiring for local sports games. My niece and my girlfriend's much younger sister are enrolled at the middle school where he worked and say that he was not only universally disliked, but when he came up to the school to get his belongings, he made a big scene and ended up hysterically crying as he was leaving. At least that's what they've heard from the kids who were attending summer school at that time. His son, who he was equally abusive towards as a child, refused to take him in or to help him out, so he ended up having to take a job as a cashier at Walmart so that he could afford the rent on his crappy little trailer in an absolutely awful neighborhood. Even though that Walmart is not the closest Walmart to my house, that is now the only place where I go grocery shopping or to purchase anything that I need. I purposely stand in line longer than I need to, just so that he can be the one who has the pleasure of ringing up my purchases. The first time I went through his line, he attempted to ring up multiple items more than one time to overcharge me, and when I called him on it, he said that I was mistaken. I asked for a manager, and the manager believed him that it was an accident, but he learned that he can't get away with that. The second time, I made sure to be as nice as possible and how to ask for a manager because he was overwhelmingly rude. The people in line behind me backed me up, and he got in some trouble for that. Every time I go there and step into line, I see him die a little bit inside, and it may be petty, but it gives me such satisfaction. Sometimes I'll say that I'm paying with exact change, and as I'm about to hand him the money, I'll say, "Oh, I didn't realize that I had a rare coin from his collection in my pocket. I guess I'll pay cash." I just sold his expensive ratcheting wrench set, and so on Monday when he works again, I'm going to go buy my daughter one of their better above ground pools, and as he's ringing it out, tell him, "I know that daughter is just going to love this pool. It's not like I would have ever used those expensive ratcheting wrenches anyway." Towed my ex's car at her expense, posted by Shadow11Wolf50. Some details are vague because while I still feel ready to share this story, I still have PTSD flashbacks and anxiety fears of her popping up on my doorstep. Context that leads up to my petty revenge. This happened about 5 years ago. My ex-wife and I were married for about 2 years, together for 5. Things were declining in our relationship, badly. Well, my ex found another partner. I'll call the new partner NP. Instead of just leaving or starting divorce proceedings, they decided that I needed to be the bad guy so they could ride off into the sunset or something. I have mental health issues, and that I was actively seeking a therapist for. I'm not saying that she had to stay and deal with my mental health issues. She gaslit, manipulated, and used my mental health against me. A side effect of most of my mental disorders is poor short-term memory. She would regularly say things that didn't happen, or I was remembering something wrong. My ex also had a new partner helping her as well. It was hard to tell what was up from down. They were both telling me I was a horrible person, and it was difficult to not believe it as it was already 2 versus 1. But they would also rope in mutual friends as well. This caused me to spiral worse than I already was, even though I was already in therapy to try to get better. They put me down constantly, told me I was fat and unattractive, killing what little self-esteem that I had left. My ex even told me one day that she had fallen out of love with me shortly after we got married. Everything hurt so much. Well, like any beaten dog, eventually I snapped and lashed out after a fight with my ex. It was one of the darkest moments of my life. She declared we were done. She told me she was moving out shortly thereafter. I was at rock bottom. She moved out a month and a half later and removed herself off the lease at the beginning of the following month. My ex didn't take everything with them, despite the fact that I didn't fight them. It was her stuff. More importantly, she left behind a $12,000 paperweight of a car that she was still making payments on. Thankfully, at the time that she got the car, I had seen how horrible the reviews were for that make and the model, and I wanted nothing to do with it. I refused to put my name on that vehicle, and I ended up being right. It wasn't even a year after she got it, the transmission was destroyed and there it sat in my driveway. For some context, my landlord had a clause in our lease against broken down vehicles just sitting on the property, and the city did too. So I kept on asking her when she was going to come and get it. I got the runaround. She'd say that she would come get it, then either went silent or pushed the day back. My ex even tried to convince me to lie and say it was mine. I flat out told her no. I didn't want to wind up in trouble for having a broken down car that wasn't even in my name. During this time, I ended up befriending a neighbor who was determined to dust me off and get me back up on my feet. I'll call her A. Well, between A and my therapist, they finally got through to me that I didn't deserve any of this and that she needed to get her crap already. Now for the revenge. Weeks of going back and forth with her to come and get her stuff. It was now over 30 days since my ex had been taken off the lease. The idea of her popping up whenever she wanted made me extremely anxious, and I vented to A. A pointed out that I could have the car towed. I got an idea, and we plotted. I gathered up the last of her stuff from inside the house, and I put it inside the car, and then called the non-emergency number to report an abandoned car. They sent someone out and got my info and some of the info off of the car, and then put a sticker on it. They said that the owner had 72 hours to remove it, or I could remove it. I warned my ex one last time that she needed to come and get her car. Silence. 4 days go by and I still hadn't gotten anything from her to make plans to come and get this stupid broken down car. Enough was enough. I called a tow company and had them come pick it up. The best part was, it was at her expense. She would have to pay them when she finally decided to do something about the car. A filmed and took pictures while the tow guy loaded it up and sent it to my ex, giggling like a maniac the whole time. Once the car was gone, I felt a sense of relief that I hadn't ever felt before. My ex had zero legit reason to return to my house. My phone was blowing up within the hour from my ex, who suddenly had plans to remove the car that she had neglected to fill me in on. Now, bombarding me with angry texts stating that I was trying to ruin her life. I told her that I was not, and that I had warned her repeatedly, and she had ignored me, and all I wanted was to be left alone. If I was the bad guy, fine, I accepted that. I then blocked her and locked down all of my social media. I felt like I could finally begin to heal and move on with my life. Not going to lie, it felt good to get some payback for the last 10 months that she had made my life heck. This HOA story's insane. A resident has a family tragedy, pays their bills, and still gets stuck with a $20 late fee. The HOA lies and tries to screw him over in the hardest of times. By Singulon. What happens next? Literally just heard this exchange in a board meeting tonight, and my jaw just about dropped, although it wasn't exactly surprising. Apparently, the resident contacted the management company after their payment didn't go through on the online system, but it was already past the due date at that time. The resident explained their situation to the management company supervisor, how they'd fallen on hard times financially, and they were also dealing with a family tragedy. Then, they successfully paid the dues, and apparently, the supervisor said it was all taken care of. Fast forward to the board meeting tonight. The resident was not present, but the story was relayed by the management company rep. The same rep also goes on to say that there is no written proof of the management company supervisor agreeing to take care of the situation, just the verbal account by the resident. The resident was fined a $20 late fee as a result, which they asked to be waived after explaining their situation and their personal and financial troubles. The board votes no, 3-1 to waive the fine, and the treasurer says it's only $20 in the most callous and disregarding manner possible. At least one board member voted yes to waive the fine, which was surprising because that same board member is usually a hardcore butt and is almost universally disliked. I immediately volunteered to pay the fine for the resident. If it's only $20, then why does the board, who has something like $3 million in reserve funds, care? $20 to them is not the same as $20 to somebody who's struggling financially and dealing with a family tragedy at the same time. And it's not like the dues weren't paid. They were. The payment is just a few days late due to the extenuating circumstances as explained. Please don't think this post is to toot my own horn either. I was just blown away by the complete lack of compassion by most of the board for their fellow neighbor over something so self-admittedly minor. It's only $20. Imagine if more people had even the smallest amount of basic compassion for their fellow human beings. How much better life could be. I think the HOA is being a jerk on the principle of it all, which is silly and stupid because you gotta get stuff in writing or else crap like this will happen and you'll be taken advantage of. How would you handle it? This is my favorite malicious compliance and petty revenge that I've ever had the joy of being part of. About 10 years ago now, I was working for a small data center in my town. I originally started there as a tech support operator and did call center work helping various small companies over the phone with basic computer issues. I wasn't over the moon about it, but I also didn't hate it. However, when one of our major clients backed out of their contract due to budget cuts on their end, my company scrambled into a reorganization and tried to keep as many employees as possible, hoping to win that client back. During that reorg, I got shifted over to physical security. I took over the role of 2 individuals while they did a lateral move. My new role had me running the daily ins and outs of the data center and its security while they were supposed to make improvements. Of course, I had never done this type of job before, but I took to it pretty quickly. It also didn't take me long to realize that one of the individuals that I replaced, Ted, wasn't quite up to snuff like he thought he was. Ted's biggest enemy was the cameras. He constantly struggled with them. He couldn't ever figure out why they weren't saving the footage the way that he thought they should be. He would bemoan about how he had a camera set up and working the way he wanted it to, only to have it stop saving the files properly a few weeks later. He also rarely let me help and take a look at the configurations of the cameras because I don't need to know how to adjust them, just how to watch them. One day though, he was struggling with a camera that a client was paying for. They wanted a camera on their servers to make sure that only their team worked on their servers. I always thought it was a bit of paranoia since each server rack had a lock and key and even security didn't have spares. But it made the client happy and the company was making money off of it, so whatever. Anyways, Ted was panicked because he couldn't get the cameras to save properly and he didn't know what to do. He eventually gave up and put a call into the camera manufacturer, Cisco, to try and get them to assist. In his frustration, he left the camera configuration open and I decided to take a crack at it. I mean, I have a technical background and camera systems aren't really all that different from any other program that I have to troubleshoot on the spot. So I wrote down all of the original configuration information and made sure I documented any changes I made. Eventually, I figured out why Ted couldn't grasp the camera issue. Ted never understood that all cameras saved their data to a single server and the server was full. And looking at just this camera configuration, I could tell why. He had the camera recording and saving all its footage for 24 hours a day in HD. Plus, he wanted this to keep 90 days worth of footage. In case you don't know much about camera or video footage, that's a lot of storage space that you'll need. That doesn't include all the other cameras that were probably also set to similar settings. But the software never errored out saying it wouldn't be able to save that much storage. It would just let you make all your changes and then at the bottom of the screen say something similar to estimated archiving max allowance, 2 days, meaning the server only had enough space to save 2 days worth of footage with that configuration. However, Ted must have never seen that or never knew what it meant. Realizing the issue, I proceeded to make the correct changes, setting the camera to record only on movement, turning it down off HD, and increasing the footage priority. That means it wouldn't be the first to be overwritten if the server ran out of space again. After making the changes, the dialog said something closer to estimated archiving max allowance, 100 days. I smiled and quickly called Ted up to let him know what the issue was and how I fixed it. However, instead of a grateful Ted, I got, "Hey Ted, I fixed the camera issue. See, what's going on is..."
"What camera issue?"
"Oh, that client camera that you struggled with earlier. I think you said that you couldn't get it to save for 90 days.
"What? Why did you touch that? You're making us breach the contract."
"But it's already broken. We're already breaching the contract."
"No, I have a ticket in with Cisco. They will fix the issue. Put it back immediately." Okay, but can I at least explain what I learned? No, just put the camera back to the original setting I had it at. Let the experts figure it out. But I figured it out. Just put it back and stop changing the configs. If I learn you're the reason we're having camera problems, I'll make sure Linda knows about it. And Linda was my boss's boss. Okay, fine. I sighed and hung up, putting the camera back to its broken configuration. Of course, Cisco never called back, and Ted forgot about the issue, and now he was plagued with even more camera problems because the rest of the cameras weren't saving their footage either. For the next 2 weeks, whenever Ted walked into the security office and had a problem with the camera, I would try to explain the issue, only to be huffed away and asked to go stand in front of that camera so I can see if it will pick up your motion. In his eyes, he essentially demoted from physical security lead to motion detection officer. Eventually, I gave up, and amongst other various issues that I had between him and management, I started to look for a new job. Now, it's my second to last day at work, and about 3 months since that day when I performed my malicious compliance. I have my replacement working at my desk, handling all the tasks that need to be done, and I'm just sitting in a corner reading a book. That's when Ted walks into the security office. His face is red, and he's huffing angrily. He goes to the wall of monitors and pulls up that same camera and then clicks furiously around on the screen while getting angrier and angrier with each passing click. I decide to see what the issue was, and wouldn't you know it, he's fiddling around in the archives section. Uh-oh, that camera isn't saving any footage for more than an hour. I couldn't help but smile. I tried to cover it with my book, but Ted glanced up at the wrong time and started going off. What are you smiling about? Nothing, I can see you're busy. Unfortunately, I couldn't help but let out a sneer of pleasure. Ted jumps up and walks directly over to me, then proceeds to try and drill sergeant me. What are you laughing at? Now, here's the thing. I've never been in the military, but I have had the drill sergeant routine placed on me 1,000,000 times in my life. I'm not scared by it anymore. Plus, I'm sitting down, so the effect isn't working properly. Thus, the laughter now spills out of me. That's the camera I had fixed for you, but you got all whiny about it and told me that Cisco would fix it. Guess you didn't follow up on the ticket. Oh, so glad you think this is funny, but you don't have to go tell the client that we don't have any of their footage that they're looking for. Nope, you're right. I don't. I spin around in my chair and then land one more tiny sucker punch. But I mean, if you're too scared to do it, I can. The worst the client can do is request I be fired, and whoops, what do you know? I've already done that for them. Ted huffs at me, draws his fist up ever so slightly, and then finally turns away, storming out of the office. The aftermath. The client never cared about the footage. They just let it drop. My replacement for my position, however, wasn't so easily cowed by Ted as I was. Also, my replacement had an in with someone much higher up in the food chain than I did. Ted only lasted another 6 months at the company before someone finally realized that he wasn't up to par. You think I should quit my job? Sure thing, man. Posted by Gator. This happened earlier this year, around the beginning of February. A friend who I hadn't talked to in a little while asked me if I was interested in applying to a food service job where they had also been working at the time. Boy, was I in for it. I agreed because I needed a little extra cash, and it wouldn't hurt to have some job experience before I started college. This would be my first job ever. According to my friend, their establishment had been understaffed lately, and they really needed the extra help. Not having worked before, I didn't realize that there was probably a reason why they were so understaffed. I contacted the manager, and he told me to come in for an interview. I was psyched, but a tad nervous because I have social anxiety, which has only worsened since the pandemic started. Here comes red flag number 1. The day of the interview, I was asked to adhere to a specific dress code, which I would later realize was the establishment's employee dress code. I then met the manager, and he brought me to the back room to ask me a few questions. I had brought him a physical copy of my resume, which he said he didn't need to look at. After a few very basic questions like my name, what school I go to, he told me I was going straight to work. So is this the start of the training then? Did I get the job? "Oh no, we don't actually have official training, so I'm just going to throw you in the kitchen to see how you do. You'll work for a few weeks, and then we can determine if you're a good fit for our establishment, and vice versa." Suddenly, this manager, who was supposedly welcoming and excited to have me join their family, began to show his true colors. Not only did he display blatant favoritism toward his more experienced employees, he berated me on multiple instances in front of my other coworkers for not being able to learn how to make our products correctly or quickly enough to his satisfaction and then get them out to the customers. I was new, not stupid. Not to mention, you literally did not train me. It got to the point where I dreaded going to work. One day, specifically, my coworker had asked me to refill the canister of lemonade as he was about to make an order for a customer. There were no other customers waiting for their product, so I helped him finish his task. This was a mistake, as my manager walked in right as I had finished pouring the lemonade. "Gator, the customer always comes first. Why are you filling up the lemonade when you should be making orders? You aren't taking this job seriously. X employee and Y employee are doing this right. Why is this so hard for you?" He left the kitchen, and my coworker who had asked me to fill the lemonade came up to me and apologized, telling me to ignore him. It was becoming obvious that my other coworkers were scared of screwing up in front of him too. This happened on various other occasions that I'll spare you the details of, but here comes the malicious compliance. It was my second to last shift of the week, falling on Saturday, which was often our busiest day. My other friend had just been hired, and we had our first shift together. I was pumped. The manager was in that day, as construction workers were setting up cameras in front of the store and in the kitchen, so he could be able to keep an eye on not only his customers, but his beloved employees. I don't exactly remember the specifics of what led up to this, but in the middle of my shift, he came up to me, with my coworkers watching, and proceeded to yell at me, saying I was too timid with the customers and how this would cost him good reviews. He said that anytime he put me on shift, he was worried he'd have to babysit me while I made the orders or I did my tasks, and if I couldn't handle the job, it's best that I quit. I was ticked. None of it made sense. I always greeted customers when they walked in. I took their orders, and I told them to have a nice day after handing them the product. Did this guy expect me to strike up a conversation with each customer like we were old friends during a rush? I wasn't even allowed to work the register yet. Also, aren't I supposed to be in the back making the order, which you so desperately need me to make anyway? None of my coworkers have filed complaints about my work being sloppy or me not being able to handle my tasks. I was doing everything right. So, I did exactly like he asked me to do. When I got home, I do have quite a problem with defying authority face to face because of my social anxiety. I messaged my manager privately that I would be showing up to my shift tomorrow because I didn't like the idea of abandoning my coworkers on such short notice, but not to put me on the schedule anymore because I would be quitting. He thanked me for being honest with myself. I came in for my last shift and told my coworkers what happened. They offered their condolences, and I actually had fun for the last few hours that I spent at that dreaded job. My manager closed that night and told them that I was leaving because of school. Complete BS. But my coworkers and I knew the real reason. I have not stepped foot into that place since, but may be so inclined in the future just to gloat a little. Here are some of the fun little updates on the current state of their establishment. Before I quit, 3 other people had also left the previous week for various reasons, and after I quit, the numbers escalated. They now have a total of 3 employees, not including the manager and his family members, whom he forces to work to make up for losses. I ran into one of my old coworkers at school, and he told me he was also quitting to work somewhere else that he'd just been hired. It was great to see him again. They have been forced to cut their open hours from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. on weekdays, and then 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. on weekends, to 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. on weekdays, and entirely closed on weekends. A "now hiring, need employees" sign is permanently situated in front of their store. I live in a smallish town, so word gets around quickly about certain crappy managers at certain crappy establishments. It's no surprise that people know to avoid working there. And here are some other red flags that I probably should have paid more attention to before jumping into the job. Employees were not required to get food handlers' licenses until 2 weeks after I'd started working there. I'm pretty sure that's actually illegal. I got one beforehand, of course. The friend who had encouraged me to take the job quit a few days after I was hired. We were constantly out of some ingredients, and my coworkers and even my manager would lie to customers about what was in their order. Allegedly, a competing chain establishment of the same food service variation was set to open up across the road, and so our manager told us that if a customer were to ever order something that sounded like it was off their menu, then to switch tabs to the other establishment's menu and make one of their products instead, and still charge them for it. Our products were way overpriced for something anyone could easily make at home. That pretty much wraps it up. Anyone who's worked a minimum wage job is braver than our troops, and I would personally like to applaud you because you are my hero. Please have a wonderful day today.